Minister sort of not only has his polling taken a punch off the back of One Nation, but he called Grace Tame this week difficult.
I think it's 12 or 13 questions, one-word answers if possible. Let's go. Susan, you'll try. Grace Tame.
Difficult.
Which was a very interesting comment for a Prime Minister who's typically been sort of very willing to engage on sort of lots of topics and has traditionally been seen as sort of very pro-Grace Tame or more supportive of her endeavours. What's your take over the commentary of calling Grace Tame difficult? Justified, not justified? What does it say?
Well, yeah, I mean, I follow a lot of the left and the right on my social media, so I'm always really interested in what both sides are saying. I think that it really helps you understand your own position if you look at the other side. To that end, what I saw was an absolute wave of support from the left of Grace Tame. Now, notwithstanding some of the early great work that she did, she has become I think she is quite a polarizing figure politically now. And that's because she has taken on board political issues. So inherently you're going to become, a politicized figure. And there was this absolute wave of support for her. And there was a lot about, difficult women, may we be them, may we raise them, those sorts of things. And look, to the Prime Minister, it was whether you like Grace Tame or not, I'll leave that up to the punters to decide. But that was a terrible choice of wording, where, for someone who just has so much media training to then sort of call a woman difficult. And I know he tried to then backtrack and say, oh, that's not what I meant. And it's like, but that was the word you chose. And so you could have...
Yeah.
You could have chose so many different things. You could have said tenacious.
Tenacious.
Yeah. Not even complicated. Complicated would have been misinterpreted, but tenacious, is a great word to describe Grace Tame, because for someone who's political and trying not to be political, choose a word that describes how she digs in and takes on an issue, or, so you don't have to go down any word like complicated, difficult. This is never going to end well. What word would you use to describe Grace Tame?
Look, I think there's some interesting articles, and like you, I read both sides. So, my morning routine is, I'll start off with maybe The Age and the Fin Review, and then I'll flip to ABC and Guardian, and then read The Australian and the Herald Sun. So, you kind of do the eclectic read of different perspectives. And I think it ranged from sort of the Guardian going very defensive of Grace Tame to sort of the Australian running this narrative that it was actually, well, she's suffering from relevancy deprivation, so she's kind of have to go further and harder and more difficult in order to sort of keep her relevancy, particularly after concluding her time in the 1 year as Australian of the Year. So look, I think it's a really difficult space. I am very cautious of how people like Grace Tame are starting to pick up on broader political issues that are potentially beyond their areas of deep understanding. So, for instance, I think Grace Tame has a very strong understanding in sort of the violence and the abuse and the assault space, and sort of is a very well regarded voice in that sector. But I think commenting on issues that she perhaps has less sort of understanding of in this particular instance.
Are people not allowed to use their platform though, Neil? If you decide that, I know, and now we might be flipping roles here, but I'm going to stand, I do, people are allowed to have a political opinion and people are allowed to have a political view. And as someone who has a platform, she has every right to go out and sort of talk and advocate for what it is that she cares about. Now, yes, that might lead to the Australian saying you've got relevancy syndrome, sure, but she's allowed to do that. And if you've got a platform that you can use, fantastic. So what do you think, that she's just stay in your lane and stick to the only thing that you were known for?
No. I think what I mean by that is in the area you've got depth, you've got a lot of credibility. If you're stretching into other areas where you potentially don't have as much credibility, and there's commentary or criticism, I think there's a degree that you probably need to accept it a little bit more. Now, notwithstanding, I wouldn't have used the term difficult, but it's...
I do notice you stepped around when I asked you the question. You went, and that's what the Prime Minister should have done. He should have gone off
he should have
and
done
taken a leaf out of your book.